Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Frontierland. We're at episode 8, would you believe? We've had a little break. I've been traveling over to America and Europe, a lot warmer than what we've got here in South Africa. Anyone watching around from South Africa tonight will probably appreciate why I've got my jacket on. They tell me here in Nelson Mandela Bay it's one of the coldest winters they can remember, so typical that I've come back in July and August. You may have seen on social media some of the incredible pictures. We've had snow all around the country. Thankfully not here in the Bay yet, but certainly in places like Johannesburg and even, would you believe, in the Kruger Park. I've got an incredible video, I don't know if you've seen this, but of one of our iconic rugby stadiums, which is absolutely white, which you've never seen the likes of before. Gary, can we just play this video that I saw on Facebook only yesterday? This, ladies and gentlemen, would you believe, is not up in Scotland, but it's actually Ellis Park in Johannesburg, as you can see, under a covering of snow. Quite incredible. And today, we're going to be talking about conservation and wildlife, and I noticed an amazing picture earlier from the Sabi Sands. Have a look at this. An absolutely beautiful giraffe there, but it's the background I was fascinated with. Look at the snow-covered mountains there. This is on the outskirts of the Kruger Park. I don't know the last time they saw snow in that area. So, yeah, there's something strange perhaps happening with our climate, but tonight we're going to be talking conservation. We're going to be talking wildlife with somebody I have certainly got to know very well since I moved to Nelson Mandela Bay, someone I admire greatly. Her name is Taryn Gillson, and it's time to bring her in.
Show. Now it's your time to shine. We're gonna have a lekker chat tonight. Another good time.
Well, Taryn, lovely to see you. We're actually in a different context than we're normally we're either in an office or, lucky for us, we're normally at a game reserve looking at animals, because you've got probably one of the best jobs in the world. I've thought that ever since we met. I've called this show tonight Wildlife Warrior, and I think in all my days I've never met somebody who cares so much about the planet and about wildlife. So first of all, welcome to the Gino spot. It's about time you came on, and I'm going to really introduce you and enjoy introducing you to the people here. So when did this all start, this passion for animals? And we're going to talk about our connection, but I want to talk a little bit about when you fell in love with wildlife.
So Dean, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. And when I first fell in love with wildlife, I was a child. I was one of those really lucky people who didn't have to sit and figure out what I wanted to do with life. I was just always very passionate about the outdoors, passionate about nature, passionate about wildlife. You know, I grew up watching the 50/50 show every Sunday on SABC, and that was my absolute favorite. My parents couldn't rip me away from the TV if that show was on. And so it was just a sort of innate love of wildlife and nature that I've always had. So a bit of a calling, I guess you could say.
You'll have to explain to me, I was obviously an Englishman, what was the 50/50 show? I'm sure people watching would know. But...
Yeah, so the 50/50 show was a local South African show, and it featured all sorts of wildlife and conservation related stories and issues. And, you know, that's when I first actually became aware of rhino poaching. The one evening they actually did show quite a graphic clip of footage. It came with a pre-warning about sensitive footage, and that just stuck with me as well. And then they had this fun little snippet called Veldfokus at the end, you know, which I used to particularly enjoy growing up.
Okay, so how old were you when you were influenced by this?
I would have been early high school years, if I think back to that particular episode with the rhino poaching featured.
Okay, but there was something about that particular show that obviously struck a chord with you. As I said, I've seen you around animals. The work you do, especially here in the Eastern Cape, but what further afield, is incredible, and I want to really let everybody know about that tonight. But I'm going to go right back to the start. You weren't actually born in South Africa. You're a Zimbo, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'm proudly Zimbo rooted, although I'm naturalized South African since my family moved here in the early 80s. So yeah.
Where were you born in
Harare?
Harare, okay,
Yes.
okay. And did you move down to the Eastern Cape with your family, or did you go somewhere else first of all?
No. My family moved to Johannesburg, so I actually grew up, schooled and studied in Johannesburg.
Okay.
And the minute I decided I was done studying, and that was me out of the urban centre and into the bush. From there, I lived and worked in the Limpopo province on a private game reserve, up to the Gqeberha strip as well, back to Limpopo, and ventured down to the Eastern Cape for work in 2008.
Okay, so it was work that brought you down to the Eastern Cape as well.
Yes.
Can you remember that very first visit to a wildlife reserve and what it did to you? To see animals in their natural habitat, of course, it's something that inspires you even today. But can you remember that moment when you thought, this is going to be for me?
Sure, it's difficult to pick what would the first one be, my family, we never used to go to game reserves much. Our holidays were always quite beach orientated, funnily enough. And so a lot of my exposure to game reserves was through school excursions. We used to have a thing called Veld School, at all our schools growing up. I did some trips to the Pilanesberg National Park. We had the Rietvlei Nature Reserve in Gauteng, and I used to go visit there as a early 20-something-year-old. And then obviously the Kruger as well, when we were doing our conservation module, when I was studying zoology, we went down to the Kruger for a couple of weeks on a big field trip there as well. And I just fell in love with it.
I mean, how privileged are we to actually live here in South Africa? Especially in the Eastern Cape. I mean, it's something we're going to come onto. We're sitting here in the centre of Port Elizabeth, yet within half an hour, as we're going to explain, we could be looking at cheetah, elephant, and in a natural habitat, which is quite a privilege. But I want to talk about how you turned this love of animals, which a lot of kids have, into a profession. And then what I love about you, Taryn, you did the hard work as well. You literally started at the bottom. You went into a reserve and you became a ranger, I believe, first of all. How did that opportunity come about?
Yeah, so after I finished studying, I did my BSc Biological Science and my honours in Zoology, and I was sitting on the cusp of that decision of, am I going to continue with my studies, or am I going to move into the bush and get stuck in now, Yeah. And I realized that if I was going to continue studying, it was really just to get the next certificates, and there wasn't any particular project that really grabbed my interest. So I decided to write the Fagaza exam. That's the Field Guides Association of Southern Africa. And that's the standard for field guiding across Southern Africa.
So we have a particular, like a field guiding Bible. Everybody must pass that if they're legitimately going to show tourists around. How is that governed? That's something I learned about, that it's very much controlled, isn't it?
Yes. So the Fagaza qualification is definitely the preferred standard. They are a standard-setting body within the field guiding industry. And I really loved the syllabus. It was super comprehensive. You studied everything from geology to ecology, weather and climate, astronomy as well.
Wow.
All the animals, from insects, frogs, reptiles, birds, mammals.
Come on, be honest. Are you a bit of a geek?
Yes. I'm a self-confessed nerd.
Yeah. Oh, well, when I've been with you, your knowledge is incredible. Not just about, obviously, the big animals, but everything. The soil, the ecosystem, and everything. And it's part of what any natural scientist should know, isn't it? It's the connection between all this.
Yeah, absolutely. The connection between everything in nature is super important to understand and appreciate. And it's actually a funny thing, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, because it's just like a rabbit hole that you end up going down every time you learn more and more, and there's more and more research always being done, and fascinating knowledge that keeps coming to light.
And which particular reserves did you really learn the most? I mean, you travelled around. I often ask you about your career and how long you spent in certain places, but clearly you were identified early on as one of the top achievers, because then you started to teach your fellow students, your fellow rangers, and that was something you obviously that came naturally. Your passion, you wanted to pass that on.
Yeah, so my career started on a small private game reserve called Mukaikai, and it was part of the Greater Mabula Private Game Reserve. So I managed a small privately owned lodge there and did the guiding as well. Okay. And based at this reserve was the Limpopo Field Guide Academy. And that's where I got exposed to actually teaching and sharing my knowledge with students and training. And that's also very much a part of how my tracking journey began, because I'm a little obsessed with wildlife tracks and science. And yeah, so that was through the Limpopo Field Guide Academy. By the time I came down to the Eastern Cape, I was already recognised as a Fagaza trainer in the system.
I'm sure if anybody's ever been on a lucky enough to have been on a game drive, the person in front, the person that's driving you, really, it's up to them to make this experience, isn't it? Not only through their knowledge, but also through their interaction with the guests. So you've got to cope with everything, haven't you? Not only you've got to manage the animals and the experience, but you've also got to make sure that the customers are happy, that there's interaction. And it's an intensive job, isn't it? I mean, it sounds a glamorous thing, but you're up at the crack of dawn, literally. You're up before the guest, you're making their coffee, you're then driving them around, and then you're getting ready to do it all again in the afternoon or the evening. So for anybody watching that wants to go into this, can you give some words of advice? Because it is an incredibly rewarding career, but it's also quite tough, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very intense. Some of the best years of my life, also some of the most tired years of my life, but it was just amazing. And, I'd never ever trade them for anything. And I think what a lot of people need to realize goes back to something that you've just said. And it's not just about the animals. People think, I'm going to become a guide or a ranger because I want to work with animals. But actually, you've got to have that affinity for people as well, Yeah. And actually, if you don't have that affinity for people, become a guide, because you will develop that as well,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed when we've worked together, you have that affinity with people, and that's something we'll talk about. The position you're in now, it's as important as your relationship with, of course, the animals and what you do, because you're in a position now, quite a bureaucratic position, where you have to deal with people as well, and to become a champion of conservation in a different way. So I just want to go back to your move down to the Eastern Cape. Did your whole family move down, or did you come down on your own?
No, I came down on my own. My time in Limpopo had come to an end. I was ready for a fresh start in life, and I flew down for an interview, and that was at Shamwari Game Reserve, and went for my interview there. I wasn't particularly enamored at first, to be honest, and it was only when I started realizing the story behind the reserve, because it was so different to the bushveld and the savanna biome that I was so accustomed to up north, and it didn't feel as wild and so forth. But then the more I learned about the history and what had actually taken place in terms of the rewilding of the land and the reintroduction of the species that had been wiped out, that actually really inspired me, and I thought, I want to be a part of this story. And I said to them, if you're looking for a trainer, please, my hand is up. They didn't have a training position at the time, so I kicked off as a senior guide. And 5 months later, the position became available, and they said, Taryn, and I said, yes, please. So
isn't that the actual draw of this part of the country? It's the story behind that. I've got the privilege of writing some of that story, of course, how Shamwari was created, the story of Mr. Adrian Gardner, how he created this wildlife tourism market, as it were. But it's the idea of this land coming back and be rewilded, isn't it? We're used to, I think we're used to sort of the landscape further north. It looks typically African, but if you come down here, it's more green, it's softer. But what we're seeing is something fundamental. We're seeing the land go back to its natural state. The first people arrived, certainly the first agriculturists in the 19th century, changed the whole landscape. They shot out the animals, they cleared the bush, of course, for agriculture to live. now we're seeing this revolution take place, which was started back with the creation of Shamwari Game Reserve in 1990 and going through. So you arrived in 2008,
Yes.
when Shamwari was now established. But could you see with your own eyes how this land was now recovering?
Yes, it was sort of still happening in front of your eyes, really, you know. So even today, there's certain parts you can still see the scars, so to speak, from the agricultural days and so forth. But very, very photographic, very picturesque. It's such a beautiful landscape. The vegetation was completely different. I really, really enjoyed learning all the new plants and species and the birds that occurred here and not where I was used to and so forth. You know, even the frogs, there were different species of frogs and so forth. So
it's like starting from scratch again.
Yeah, it was an amazing journey. And I really, really enjoyed running the field guide training school at Shamwari for those 2 or 3 years. And it's really memories you can't trade for anything. It's a special time in my life.
And were you aware of what was happening beyond Shamwari? Of course, we've got some incredible reserves here in Nelson Mandela Bay and beyond, Kariga, Amakala, those things, with families that go back almost to the settlers. You've got this history of how the land use has changed since those early settlers. And now, thankfully, we've created, thanks to Adrian Gardner, we've created a destination. So people actually come to the Eastern Cape for this unique experience. And I was reading only yesterday when I was doing my research that the original explorers said this was actually the home of some of the richest wildlife, they said, in Africa, which is quite amazing when you think of our coastline. We think of the Eastern Cape being more famous for its coastline and its resorts, Port Elizabeth, East London, these kind of big cities. Yet the wildlife was here all around us. Are you passionate about bringing the indigenous animals back? Is that something that you believe in? Because I know that's a question when it comes to rewilding. Is that important for you?
Yes, no, it is very important. I think it is important for conservation to restore the original biodiversity as far as possible, bring those species back, because those species are there in the ecosystem for a reason. Each species has its niche, its role to play. There's connections, you know, and I always like to talk about the web of life, you know, and each species represents like a knot in the web of life, and it's connected to all the other species around it by this web. So when a species goes extinct or is removed from an area, it's not just the species that disappears, it's those connections and those relationships with everything around it. So it creates this gaping hole effectively in this web of life, and it's weakening biodiversity. And biodiversity is so important because all life depends on biodiversity being healthy. So if we're busy damaging biodiversity, we actually are harming ourselves at the end of the day, because all life, including humans, cannot survive without a healthy system of biodiversity in place.
I remember you explaining that to me early on in one of our first conversations, and I was completely sold, like I'm sure everybody watching will be, because you come from a point of authority, but also a point of knowledge and passion, and it's clear. I want to talk about what you're doing now, because this man, Adrian Gardner, he clearly is part of both of our lives, but you are still connected with him, because obviously once Shamwari, he sold Shamwari around the time that you kind of got involved. But he's still involved in rewilding. He's still involved in conservation. He's one of the leading marketers of the Eastern Cape, which is fantastic. Going into his 80th year. Sorry, Adrian, I must mention that to remind us that how valuable you are to us. But what do you do now? We're both involved in something called the Community Conservation Fund of Africa, and I'd just like to explain to people watching what that is and how special it is.
So the CCFA, or Community Conservation Fund Africa, is a non-profit organisation that was established in 2018. It was actually through the merger of hospitality group called Mantis and hospitality group called Accor, and they provided the seed funding to get this Community Conservation Fund going. And basically the fund we work at the intersection of conservation, ecotourism and community to basically make sure that we are preserving biodiversity. And we take this holistic approach. So it's about the land and the ecosystems, it's about the wildlife and the biodiversity, and then most importantly, it's about the people that we work with. So the local communities in conservation areas. As our name suggests, Community Conservation Fund, Community comes first. So it's very important for conservation, for the future of wildlife. You're not going to achieve anything unless you've got the involvement of the community to the point where they are participating in and benefiting from conservation and ecotourism in a sustainable way.
One of my favourite quotes is from a very well-respected man in conservation, Colin Bell, and he says, conservation without cash is a conversation. So there is a financial element to all this, isn't it? The link to business, whether it be through tourism, anything that generates an income is going to strengthen the point of conservation, isn't it, surely? But sometimes we tend to be a bit, we tend to be purist in our views, that we don't think that business is involved in conservation, but it is. And someone like Adrian realised that from an early stage. That's why he brought in international tourists, funded this movement. That's why we've got a landscape that looks like it does. How important is that business aspect to conservation? And I know it's something you deal with on a daily basis.
Oh, it's critical. You need that commercial element. That's what makes it sustainable at the end of the day. And the philanthropic side of things certainly has its place in conservation and really helps to get things going as well. And people, the philanthropic side of things really allows people all over the world to get involved and contribute in whatever way they can. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what we like to call the conservation economy, and building an economy around conservation. Because if there's money coming out of the wildlife and the land, in a sustainable way, then that land and that wildlife will stay.
We put a value on the land and the animals in a different way, don't we? We're used to it being agriculture, the traditional farming methods that we've seen. Now, income is being derived from a far more beneficial way. Yes, we have to still produce food. That's something that's given. But the fact now that we can reintroduce these animals that once lived there, and they can also create an economy is I know Adrian's, one of the things he's proudest of is the fact that at its height, Shamwari employed 500-600 people. That shows how you can support a community with this kind of activity as well. And that's something we're doing now with projects we're going to talk about. But before we go any further, I just want to invite people now. This is look at all these comments. We've got all these comments coming in, which is absolutely fantastic. I think your parents are watching down in Neisner.
Yes, I'm sure they are.
So hello to Taryn's parents. Let's see some of these wonderful comments that are coming in. Look. Yeah, I know we do. We all love Taryn. I think I mentioned you were coming on the show, and without a doubt, everybody said about time. This is something we needed to do. Okay, yes, Wayne, we are fortunate to have Taryn, that's for sure. And Wayne Bolton is another man who cares passionately about our environment and does such great work for rhino conservation, of course. What I want to do, Gary, if we can just bring up some of the pictures from Taryn's illustrious career and some personal ones as well, because I love this, and you can start telling a story. Now, this particular rhino has a story, and he's very special to you, isn't he?
Yes. So this rhino's name is Shungu, and he's actually from Victoria Falls, and he was the first rhino we darted in the first ever rhino dehorning operation that I was part of organising, and I got very, very emotional that the second that chainsaw hit his horn, I had to sort of fall back from the group and recompose myself and then reapproach. I just thought to myself, we shouldn't have to do this. It seems wrong in that way to dehorn the rhinos. It was just the smell of it, the sound of it, the shards of rhino horn flying everywhere. It's not a pretty thing, and it is a very emotional thing. So people think it sounds like super glamorous, oh, we're dehorning rhinos and whatnot, but there's a very heavy emotional side that comes with it. And, once we had dehorned all the rhinos on the reserve, we obviously went out looking for them very regularly, like from that same afternoon, the next day and so forth. And we located them. And when I found Shungu, I was just so happy to see him. He was just walking around, a slightly better view maybe. And I'd rather have found him alive and dehorned than the opposite.
I've noticed you do have a personal relationship with these animals that you rewild, don't you? But it must be quite tough when sometimes, as nature happens, they don't make it or something happens to them. How have you learnt to develop a bit of a tougher or a shield, should I say, in recent years, or is it still something that you can't help yourself with?
Yeah, I think, you know, I have managed to grow a tougher skin, so to speak, but I will still become emotional about certain losses and things, but I do understand it's part of it's the nature of the job. There are risks associated with doing these sorts of things, you know. Animals can react negatively to the veterinary drugs. You can do everything by the book and something will still go wrong and you'll still lose an animal. And it's never great.
Never
you know?
great, no.
Yeah.
No, especially the kind of work you put in and the team puts in to get that animal to that place.
Yeah.
But I suppose that's one of the downsides to what we're doing, and it's trying to create a population that's sustainable and it's healthy.
Yeah,
and it's
I mean,
turning
the grander scheme of things, you know, the populations are growing, things are looking up, you know, so, and it's to be expected to have a loss here and there. You can't have 100% success rate with anything in life, I guess, so.
But like Adrian, you surround yourself with experts, trusted people that you rely on. They explain this to you and to the team, and you understand that that's one of the risks, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Conservation is certainly very collaborative. You'll never achieve meaningful conservation results without solid partnerships in place, and so we're very grateful for the partners and the people that we work with in the projects that we're busy with at the moment.
Probably a good time to give a shout out to some of those partners that are important to us here in the Eastern Cape. Just for example, we'll see video footage soon of bringing cheetah to Enyosi Wildlife Reserve, just on the edge of Port Elizabeth, which we're all excited about. We want everybody to go and visit, but it wasn't just the CCFA, was it? It was a lot of people involved in that. What other agencies were involved?
Yeah, so we've got a collaboration going with the Meta Population Initiative, with the Aspinall Foundation, and on the community aspects of the project, because it's never just about the wildlife, it's also about the people. We've got the involvement of the Wilderness Foundation Africa, and Indalo, Indigenous Nursery, they've started their own non-profit as well. Amazing.
We'll talk about the role of the cheetah champion before we end the show, and that's something else. Gary, can we have a few more images up? Because, here, what's going on here? This looks like it's Vic Falls again?
Yes, this was in Victoria Falls. I spent a lot of time there between 2012 and 2015, while setting up a conservation program there. So I couldn't pass up the opportunity to do some whitewater rafting.
Did you go in? Did you
Yes, yeah. You can't say you've been whitewater rafting if you haven't fallen in.
Isn't there something there called the washing machine that sucks you in, spins you out, and hopefully brings you back up again?
Yes, luckily I did not experience a washing machine. I was quite terrified at that thought, but it was definitely one of the funnest things I've ever done. I'll do it again in a heartbeat.
Oh, amazing. Absolutely amazing. And that's an important part of the world for you, as are these people. And I know the man on the left, of course, Robbie Audie. Now, who are they? Explain.
Yes, so this is in Rwanda. We went guerrilla trekking. I was on a 2-week conservation trip, and we had Robbie Audie along with, and Jan Falgate, who was on the CCFA team at the time. I was there in my Mantis and Worldwide Experience capacity at the time, and Rob is the Executive Director for the SeaWorld Bush Gardens Conservation Fund, and we met back in about 2012, and he's supported a lot of our rhino conservation work in Zimbabwe and in South Africa, particularly through the Wilderness Foundation Africa as well, for many years. And my first international trip, I was sent to the States by Adrian. I thought he had lost the plot. So
there's always an ulterior motive, come on.
He says, I'm sending you to Bush Gardens, which is a zoo, right? And I said, why are you sending me to a zoo? And first of all, I was terrified. I'd never left Africa in my life. And I said, I don't know what to do in a first world country. They're going to eat me alive. And anyway, got on the plane, off we went to Tampa, Florida. And I ended up joining with one of the educational groups that was going around the zoo. And I was just blown away by the enclosures and the care that went into the animals and the habitats and so forth, you know. And I actually thought, sure, these animals are actually really spoiled, you know, because my reference of zoos wasn't great, and I just was very anti-zoo and so forth. And what really stood out for me as well was the the support of the conservation fund. There was a percentage of every ticket, of every souvenir shop sale, basically everything. And they used that fund to actually fund in the field conservation projects all over the world. And we've been privileged enough to receive grants from the fund for rhino conservation work specifically.
No, it's incredible. And a quick plug for my podcast on Gqeberha FM, also called Frontierland, because I interview Rob Yordy. Some of the stories, if you get a chance to listen to that, are quite incredible. How the money from tourists is used, and this man goes around the world and basically looks for these wonderful manageable and pragmatic causes which we've got here in the Eastern Cape, and I know he's a real champion of what we're doing here. So yeah, no, really interesting. But I want to show you the picture, ladies and gentlemen, of what they were actually looking for that day. It was Rwanda, you said?
Yes.
I mean, look at that. Did you take that picture?
Yes, I'm proud to say I snapped that pic.
Oh, stunning.
It was
stunning.
a phenomenal experience. Had to take the opportunity while we were in Rwanda on this trip, and it's just one of those life-changing experiences. I don't know if I'll get the opportunity again, but if I do, I'll certainly go for it.
Absolutely humbling. I mean, to be in the presence of those magnificent animals. Did you see the silverback, the big boy?
Yes.
Ooh.
The whole troop was there, and we got to spend an hour with them as part of the guerrilla trekking experience. And it actually just went by so fast, it was just so ethereal. It felt like time just stood still, but yet also just went way too fast as well. It was magical just being in the forest in the first place,
It's sometimes you need to just have those moments, don't you, to see. I mean, we're just so busy in our life, but just sit quietly and watch animals, which is why we love going on game drives and seeing wildlife. It's something inside you. It just changes. It's calming, isn't it? And you realise that the animals are in tune with this planet. Perhaps at times we're not.
Oh, absolutely, yes. They're definitely more in tune than I would say most of the human population is with the planet, I think people run around with the stresses of everyday life and so forth, and unless it's part of your career, I think it's quite a challenge for people in the modern day to stay connected to nature. And I think it's really important just to promote the idea that we need to make a conscious effort to spend time in nature, get to know nature, and realise that it's not us in nature. We are just part of nature,
See, that's why I love being around you, Taryn. You calm me down. You explain everything, and it just sounds so right. Of course, I think we got some pictures, Gary, of some more important people. First of all, this is Nelson Mandela Bay, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, we're the centre of the bottlenose dolphin.
Yes, so we are the capital, the bottlenose dolphin capital of the world in Nelson Mandela Bay, or Gqeberha Bay.
Gqeberha Bay,
And my husband and I were out stand-up paddleboarding the one morning, and we were lucky enough to be visited by a school of dolphins.
And when we talk about the big five, of course, we got the big six, because the southern right whale visits us each year, and it's absolutely incredible what we've got out there in the ocean, just off of the coast as well. And you're always out walking your dogs. Every time I see you, you're on the beach, you're running, you just want to be outside. Am I right in saying you don't have a TV?
Yes.
There you are. How about that? How many people can say that she doesn't have a TV, which is quite...
I've refused to have one since 2006.
And not for any kind of hippie kind of thing. You just find your entertainment in other things, don't you?
Yeah, it's just not a part of our lifestyle. Quite happy to get home. We take the dogs for a walk. We, reading, we're cooking, get to bed quite early because I'm up very early in the morning to go for a jog and so forth.
Yeah.
So,
With you, you've got two. You call them your fur babies, two Alsatians, who are your life. And of course Gareth, who's also a professional diver. So you guys are out all the time. I mean, would you live anywhere else other than here? I mean, we've got everything, haven't we?
Oh, I love it. I mean, I think the beauty of Nelson Mandela Bay and just the Eastern Cape in general is you've got some of the best beaches and you've got the bush. It's the best of both. So for a naturalist like myself, it really is. You don't get much better than this,
Well, as you know, I was dragged by Adrian Gardner here, kicking and screaming. He said, well, you better move to Port Elizabeth to write this book for me, Dean. I was in Cape Town, and within 2 days I'd fallen in love with the place, and we're not going anywhere because it does have everything. It's really South Africa's best kept secret. We're trying our best to let the rest of the world know about it, of course. Gary, have we got any comments coming through? Because I know we've people watching a local to the area. Oh my goodness, look at them all coming through. I can see Sharon Jessup there, who's another great ally of what we do. What a wonderful career, yes.
Shani, hello. Fellow wildlife tracker.
There we are. Marika, yes, Steenkamp, yeah, what a wonderful career. It's just, as I say, to follow your passion is amazing, isn't it? There we are. Awesome wife, cousin. No, brilliant. No, I'm so glad that we have got you on, Taryn, because you are quietly spoken, but an ambassador for the Bay, but also for our wildlife here as well.
Oh, my sister. We call each other Pooh Bear.
Okay, all right. Well, you can't always help your family. Nice to see you. Oh, lovely. That's brilliant. Certainly dedicated, information and passionate. That is, Sharon, you've summed our Taryn up for there. Wealth of knowledge as well. Anybody who ever gets the chance to go out with Taryn, please do so, because you will learn so much. I know I do, that's for sure.
Oh, there's Brian. Calls me Zippy.
Okay. Brian made a good point there about how the Eastern Cape has turned into this wildlife destination. I think we've got a picture of perhaps the man who was the pioneer behind that, Gary, haven't we? And I know he's watching here. We've got to give a shout out to Adrian, watching there at home. He's an inspirational character, isn't he, Adrian Gardner? He's one of those people that takes you along with him, with his passion. Doesn't often explain what he's doing, but you know there's a motive behind it. And what he's doing at the moment, you think most people in his early 80s, Adrian, I'm sorry to say again, would have their feet up. But he's created something really special over the last year, and it's something I've been involved in and you've been intimately involved in. And you'll see Wildlife Reserve, which is on the edge of Port Elizabeth, only 30 minutes outside. Literally, we could get in a car now and we could look at cheetah, elephant, antelope of all varieties. I know we've got plans for a lot more animals to come in there. But how did that come about? And tell us a bit of the rationale behind that particular place, because it's not just the game reserve, is it? It's got this educational and this wider purpose about it.
Yeah, it really does come back to the holistic conservation approach, and you know the three spheres that the CCFA works in: the ecotourism and the conservation and the community. And when I'm going to talk about community now, I'm going to talk about it in the bigger sense. You know, we really want people in Nelson Mandela Bay, which is including Gqeberha, it's including Gqeberha, to really take emotional ownership of Nyosi Wildlife Reserve and claim it as their special place, and these are their special animals, and it's accessible to people, to local residents, because you don't have to pay to stay at a fancy lodge to have this amazing wildlife experience. You can come in for a day visit and so forth. So that's made it really accessible to people, and I've really enjoyed hearing some of the feedback related specifically to that. And really how the project pivoted was thanks to COVID, because a lot of pivots were thanks to COVID. And originally the reserve, it was previously known as Hopewell Conservation Estate. It was destined to be an eco-residential estate actually. And you know, the urban sprawl hadn't quite physically caught up enough yet, so it hadn't really taken off. And, you know, obviously during COVID, we were all brainstorming and figuring out how to pivot and so forth. And we said, well, you know what, we know what we do best, and that's ecotourism and conservation. So let's go back to our roots. And there was a lot of discussion with the landowners, who are brilliant people and also very like-minded when it comes to conservation and community engagements. And that's where the idea was born, you know, to run a day centre. And back in the early days of Shamwari, actually, Adrian ran a day centre there. Yeah. So it was almost like doing a full circle. So, yeah, we set about doing the master plan and deciding what, you know, getting management plans from local ecologist Dr. John O'Brien, bringing back the elephants, the buffaloes. We've got a plan for rhinos that we're busy working on. We've got our cheetah rewilding project on the go and so forth. So very exciting stuff going on there. And then, as I say as well, with the CCFA, we're coming in and really focusing on what can we do with the community. And since 2019, the CCFA has been very intimately involved in the Gqeberha township through the Greening the Community project, which was the vision of the Ndalo NPC. You've met Blackie Witboy, who's one of the founding members, and he's just got green fingers of notes, very passionate about trees and passing on that knowledge to the youth, you know. So we've been intimately involved, and we run annual youth development courses. We've got internship programs and so forth. And since the reserve opened to the public in 2010, you know, there's been more and more people being employed by the reserve, you know. Obviously it's early days and it's still scaling up and so forth, but what Adrian always points out is the multiplier effect. It's not just about what you're doing on the site, it's about, you know, the transfers and the flights and, you know, the food and beverage that you've got to bring in and so forth. So there's this big multiplier effect from having a game reserve with the ecotourism operation that really does just uplift the whole area around it.
Without a doubt. I was lucky enough or fortunate enough to be there the day that you released the first elephant back into that area, and it was quite surreal because it was almost 30 years, almost to the day that Adrian Gardner released his first animals into Shamwari, his first elephant. And I was, as everyone was watching these magnificent animals come off the big lorry that brought them in, which was quite incredible to watch in itself, I was watching him. And I thought, what a moment that this man is doing it again. Where, as I said, when I'm 80, you'll find me on a golf course or on a beach, but he's doing it again. And it's almost like this process drives him, which is quite incredible. And what I find even better is that the community, as I said, you've got cheetah champions from the local community. You've got people like Blackie who know that area better than anyone else, and you're bringing people in. But better than anything else, ladies and gentlemen, it's affordable. It's really affordable. You can go out there, you can have a lunch, you can go on a game drive. It's not this elite thing that sometimes wildlife tourism is believed to be. Of course, Adrian's got the prestigious Founders Lodge that a lot of international tourists and domestic tourists go to if you want that special experience. But the thing about Nyosi is it's a place you can go for an afternoon, a lunch. We're looking to bring in accommodation as well, which will be fantastic. But isn't it great when you go there and you see people who have never even been on a game drive before? They're seeing a zebra for the first time in real life, and you watch their eyes. I just get the biggest kick out of that. It's a privilege, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You know, you see people, they just want selfies on the game viewer because they've never actually been on a game viewer before.
And it's great fun, isn't it?
At my stage in my career, I just really take something like that for granted, like totally. And, you know, it's been very humbling in a way, you know, and for people to be seeing animals like zebra and eland and giraffe for the first time, you know, and it also takes me back to the surrounding communities that we're working with as well. You know, those kids, they haven't seen a zebra, they haven't seen a giraffe. So I'm very excited that we're going to be working with the Connected Planet Foundation from the UK. They're going to help sponsor trips for school kids to Nyosi.
Brilliant.
To experience the natural heritage and so forth. And on that note as well, when we first started with this project, a lot of people thought we were a bit mad. You're doing this in an urban area. Soon it's just going to be urbanization all around. And I said, well, that's part of the point actually, you know, and like Adrian always says, you've got Central Park in New York and Hyde Park in London and so forth, and here, right between these two cities of Gqeberha and Gqeberha, we're going to have Nyosi Wildlife Reserve, so it'll be like a Central Park, but just very wild. And people say, yeah, but you've got a township of 200,000 people strong on your boundary, isn't that a concern? I said, no, that excites me. That's an opportunity to reconnect even more people with nature and the endemic biodiversity. That really is exciting to me.
And that's explained when you go on a drive by the wonderful people that work there, and it makes it even more special. It gives you that sense of history being created again, because this is a lung, isn't it? This is an area of land that would have been lost to urbanization, that has been basically rewilded and brought back to its original state, and now the animals are taking over again, which is quite incredible. Gary, I believe we've got a video of those elephants being released, that moment, which I remember. It just still a very special moment.
This one?
Yeah, the elephant one, if you don't mind. Wow.
So these 5 elephants, a bit of a grumpy matriarch over there, they were given to us by Gqeberha Game Reserve, and they arrived in about August last year. And so this is a core unit of 5. There's 4 females in total. There's the 2 adult females, and then there's also a young bull. So there's 5 in total over here, and they already represented an elephant unit from where they were. So for the first time in literally 200 years, elephants are back on the land, and Nelson Mandela Bay can say we've got elephants, you know.
Amazing.
And it's just been a privilege to watch their journey, learning the land, exploring, settling in, and so forth. And we recently, we collared the matriarch. We needed to fit a GPS collar on her, and that was an amazing experience as well.
And you got hands-on with that, as you often do, I'm sure.
Yes. I try and take up any opportunity to get out into the field.
Yeah, get out of that office, that's for sure. I think we've got footage as well, Gary, of the cheetah rewilding program, which I've been involved in, which is totally exciting. It's thrilling to see these beautiful animals close by. I think it's that one, Gary. Thank you.
For me, this is actually quite cheap.
This is the cheetah.
Oh, this is
we
the
needed to capture and rehome this female cheetah. We had been fostering her at Nyosi while our partners, the Metapopulation Initiative, were securing her permanent home for her. She was just a bit woozy there from the veterinary drugs taking effect. And so we had to bring in a chopper because of the thicket vegetation, very difficult to track in that vegetation, and the chopper just made our work 10 times easier in that regard. So here the vet, Dr. Murray Stoker, is busy treating her, making sure she's okay, and then we had to carry her to her transport crate on the back of the pickup truck. Here we're just fitting a collar so that she can be tracked at her new home.
Beautiful animal.
And yeah, it actually went very well, and that was the same day we actually collared the elephant matriarch. And then she's being released at Salati Game Reserve all the way in Limpopo near Phalaborwa.
Amazing. And the idea is to make sure the genetics are healthy.
Yes.
Because if you want to avoid interbreeding, you want to avoid small populations in close areas. So it's a case of moving the animals around. So we're still playing God in many respects. Nature would have sorted that out, but because these animals are in confined areas still, we're still having to manage that.
Yeah, so if I go back to about 1900, there were about 100,000 cheetah in the world.
Wow.
And today there's only about 7,100. And what happened in their conservation history is that due to human expansion and conflict with humans and so forth, the overall cheetah metapopulation got segregated into about 29 subpopulations, and this was catastrophic for their gene pool. So they went through this genetic bottleneck, basically. So it's very important that we do carry out what we call human-mediated gene flow. And that's where Vincent of the Metapopulation Initiative comes in, and he helps coordinate the movements of the various cheetahs to the various game reserves and so forth, and all the genetics are monitored and so forth. At the moment we've got a very special cheetah at Nyosi. She's a captive-born cheetah, and we work very closely with the Aspinall Foundation on this particular cheetah project. And she's come from the Hoedspruit Endangered Species Centre. And this is quite exciting because the cheetahs from that particular centre have a very pure bloodline.
Wow.
And so we're very excited
They're like pedigree.
Yes. So we're very excited to rewild her at Nyosi and then let her integrate into the meta population a bit down the road once she's learned to hunt for herself and so forth. I actually got the updates just before I left home to come here this evening from our COO at Nyosi, who's Cameron Doyle, to say she's just killed a earland calf, which sounds a bit cruel, but
the process
fantastic
is happening.
news.
It's success, isn't it?
She's starting to hunt, and we obviously get very nervous with these projects and so forth, but it really helps to have partners to hold our hands basically, and and to know that in the greater scheme of things, we're doing the right thing for the species and for this cheetah. She gets to live a wild life again.
Amazing, isn't it?
Out of captivity, because she was captive born. So, you think to yourself, how is she going to learn to hunt and how is she going to know what to do? But it's really incredible how their natural innate instincts just start kicking in.
And she's got her own champion, Anele, of course.
Yes.
Now tell me about her. Someone from the local community, and it's a case of education, of feedback, but giving someone a responsibility. And I remember when she was released, it was Anele who actually lifted the cage, and out she came. It was an amazing moment.
Yes, it was very important to me that it was Anele who released her from her crate. So for every cheetah we rewild, CCFA has a commitment to empower a local community member, whether that's through a skills program or an internship or an employment opportunity, or whatever it might be for that particular individual. So we will then pair this cheetah champion with the cheetah that we are rewilding, and all the funds raised for the project won't only support the cheetah, but it will also support the cheetah champion in their to achieve their dream. So, for example, Anele, she's come through our youth development program, which we call Greening Young Futures, and she was actually one of the graduates who was selected for an internship at Nyosi. She impressed the management so much that she was offered a permanent position as a guest relations officer. But she's actually an aspiring field guide. She wants to do safaris. So the money that I'm raising through the project will also pay for her to attend an accredited field guiding course that's FGAZA endorsed. And once she's successfully completed that, she'll return to Nyosi with a guaranteed job as an apprentice field guide.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, what's happening out at that reserve, please, ladies and gentlemen, if you're in the Nelson Mandela Bay area, please go and visit. Cameron and Rez and the team out there do an incredible job. And as I said, it's 30 minutes outside of the city centre. And it's just the most calm, beautiful place. It's in a valley, and there's lots and lots going on there. And as you can see, it's not just about game viewing, it's about the educational side as well, and more importantly, getting local people involved as well, isn't it? I think we're just going to wrap up, Gary, by having a look at maybe a few more comments. And I know there's one or two videos still I'd like to show, because you've had such an exciting life, Taryn. It's hard to condense it in the 45 minutes or so, that's for sure. But look at all the comments coming through. Oh, look at this. Someone from Wales. Eastern Cape is home. Always been a passion. Thank you, Ian. That means a lot. It's nice to know you're watching. Yeah, Natalie, I think that's an interesting point. I think Natalie makes it. I think we're all involved in conservation in the way. It doesn't have to be the obvious, does it? Conservation starts at home. It starts what you do with your rubbish. It starts with how you live your life, doesn't it?
No, absolutely.
Without preaching, I know, because I've been thinking about my own lifestyle ever since I've moved here. That's for sure. Oh, here we go. What if they had to bring Gino Fabry is sitting in his house just over the road, and he's watching from there, still causing havoc, as you can see. Eastern Cape offers everything, doesn't it, Sharon? That's for sure. You're also a very important part of what we do in this area. So yeah, no, the Eastern Cape, we certainly love it. But I want to, Gary, can you just bring up a picture of Mr. Gardner, because I know he's within that. Can you not find him?
I can find him online.
No, he's in part of the images, wasn't he? I'm sure. Was he not? Yeah, look at the stills. He's in there somewhere.
There he is. Yeah.
There he is. Can you see him? There he is. We had to see it. I promised to show her, but this was recently, wasn't it?
Yes. This is a very special picture for me. In May, we were on a trip over to Abu Dhabi, where we were invited by a wonderful organisation called American Humane, and they've got an international arm called Global Humane, and that was just wonderful. So we were all on a trip over there, and we are looking to partner with Global Humane in a very special way, where we'll be walking a much more intimate journey together. And so we went on a desert safari on this day. So
did I see somewhere that Adrian rode a camel?
Yes, we got Adrian onto a camel. I should have put that picture in.
Should have put that one in.
But yeah, just very, very special human, phenomenal, such a visionary, and it's just been such a privilege to work with someone like Adrian. He's not just a boss, he really, I'd consider him a dear friend. He's been a mentor, a father figure, And he's one of the highlights of my career, hands down, you know.
And coming from you, that says a lot. And yeah, certainly I'm looking forward to the book coming out, where I'm discovering the most incredible kind of stories, not just about conservation, but about business, about the highs and lows of life, about the importance of family. We saw his lovely wife Shirley Ann there, of course, and we've all got to know and love the family. An absolute inspiration, that's for sure. Somebody just asked about the name of the reserve. Can you spell it and explain what it means?
Yeah, sure. So it's Nyosi Wildlife Reserve, Nyosi. Nyosi in the Xhosa language means bee. So we like to think of Nyosi as the place of honey, which is quite symbolic because it's like a place of opportunity and so forth. So yeah, that's Nyosi for you.
No, we'll put details. We'll put the website up and about the actual reserve. As I said, I just want everybody to go there because for me it's so accessible. Do you know the biggest thrill I get is to sit there on a Sunday and watch the faces after they come back from a drive and just the buzz around people of all backgrounds. There's a wonderful story about a mother and a daughter who actually walked that road from the main road because they'd heard about this place. Incredible that we're generating that kind of passion again for our wildlife. So before we go, I want to take you back to Vic Falls and that project there, because the rhino we were talking about, there's a story behind that. So Gary, can we just put on that video with the helicopter at the end, please? And I just want look how exciting your life is. Now tell us what was happening here.
So this was during the rhino operation at a private game reserve in Victoria Falls. Phenomenal piloting going on there. And so we were darting the entire population of black rhinos on the reserve. You're going to see over here the chopper touches down. Here comes the mother. We darted her calf and she was just not having it. So she's charging the chopper. The chopper had to get out of there.
Wow.
And so we decided, well, we better dart her at the same time. So
she is underneath the helicopter there.
She
He's
really
off.
went for him, yeah. And so we ended up darting her at the same time and dehorning mother and calf together. So just to reduce that stress, she was really not happy.
Wow, that's incredible piloting as well. Look at that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely amazing. So you're not done yet, are you? You've got so much more work to do. I'm sure everybody watching will be glad about that.
Yes.
It is a passion. What's on the horizon for you? What can we look out for?
Well, we've got, we're going to continue with our cheetah rewilding projects. We've working on an elephant project. We, all sorts of things. We want to introduce an annual Nyosi festival, by the way, and all the proceeds from that will go directly via the CCFA into the projects at Nyosi, the community and the conservation projects. Just a shout out to Taryn Gillson as well. I know she's been watching and commenting away.
Yes, you've got something coming up, haven't you?
Yeah, she's initiated a Row for Rhinos fundraising event.
Rowing, indoor rowing.
It's indoor rowing, and it's also a Guinness World Record attempt for the most amount of miles rowed in a 24-hour period.
Wow.
So there's a team of 6 rowing students from the Grey Boys High School.
Okay, here in Gqeberha.
And then there's 6 ladies, mostly from the local rowing team.
Okay, so you've got some decent rowers here. I'm glad to hear it. People who know what they're doing.
Yes, mostly.
And you?
And yes, I've been roped in. So I'm going from running to rowing now, but I'm really enjoying it, and that's taking place on the 4th and 5th of August.
So how can we get involved in that? Where is it taking place?
That's taking place at the Boardwalk Mall.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and it kicks off at 3 p.m. on the 4th of August, and it will run for 24 hours.
So we'd like people to come down, show their support, and watch you in agony, probably.
Yeah, they can watch the first bit and the last bit.
And you go throughout the night?
Pretty much, yes. So every hour, each athlete will row for half an hour. So we'll be put into teams of 2. So each lady will be paired with a grey student. So I suppose the student will row half an hour, then we will row half an hour, and we will repeat that 24 times.
I tell you what, Taryn, I'll just come and bring the water for you at various times. Okay, I like my rowing. I like my rowing, but no, that's taking a bit further. So no, very, very much good luck with that. And I'd just like to say how honoured I am to be associated with you, be associated with the CCFA. I'm so glad that we've been able to bring your story to people perhaps who don't know that much about you, because you're a wonderful lady. You do not promote yourself, you do not tell everybody what you do, but I can say this, and I mean this sincerely, everybody I speak to in the world of conservation holds you in such high esteem because what you stand for. Because you stand for nature, you stand for the planet, basically. And you don't do it out of a place of ego, you do it because this is your passion. And I thank you for that. And I'm so excited to be here in the Eastern Cape, to be able to work together with our guidance under Mr. Gardner, of course. He's going to be around a lot longer than most of us, that's for sure. And we're going to continue doing good things. And thank you for coming on tonight. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much for those kind words, Dean, and for everything you do for the Eastern Cape. And it's just it's wonderful to have you on board with the CCFA as an ambassador of ours. And I know that you take any opportunity you can get to spread the message of conservation and the word about the projects that we're busy with. So thank you so much as well.
No, I do a little bit. And as I say, Frontierland is about South Africa, but it's about our province here in the Eastern Cape and the great work you're doing. So what we'll do, ladies and gentlemen, we'll share those links. Remember the 4th and 5th, go and support the ladies and the guys doing that rowathon, and we'll see you, and you'll see Game Reserve very soon. Thank you, Taryn. Thank you for coming out, and see you back in the office tomorrow.
Yes, thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.